consider those other things accessory organs. Okay? The hair, the nails, and the glands are going to be considered accessory organs. So the integumentary system is the skin and the accessory organs that go with the skin. And that set of things has 5 main functions. Number 1 is protection. That is the main obvious one. But another very, very large function is regulating temperature. How does your skin help to regulate your temperature? Sweat, right? How else? Sweat's the obvious one. There's another mechanism we use. We talked about in the very first lecture.
Shivers.
Shivers are muscles, so that's going to be below the skin. What about blood?
So homeostasis.
Yeah, so in that homeostasis slide, in order to help cool us off, what did we do with the blood? It helps to regulate the body temperature.
It goes away from the surface, don't it?
It goes away from the surface in what situation?
When you're hot.
When you're cold.
When you're cold, that's all that.
The blood is hot. And so we want to get the blood to the surface so that it can lose that heat. So vasoconstriction was the narrowing of the blood vessels to prevent the blood from getting to the skin. If we get hot and you start to turn flush and pink, that's because you vasodilated. The blood is now getting to your skin so that you can lose the heat out of that blood. Our skin is also in charge of some of our sensations. Cutaneous sensations. Cutaneous refers to skin. And so touch, pain, and temperature are going to be duties of the skin. So touch, we're going to see that there are 2 subtypes. There's kind of 2 types of touch. There's light touch, and then there's pressure. Pain is obvious, and then temperature, right? This is a different type of temperature than knowing whether our body temperature is too hot or too cold. This is touching something outside of our body and knowing that it is hot or it is cold. Our body is also, our skin is also important in excretion and absorption. Okay? What's something you can think of that we would excrete from our skin? Sweat. What's something else? Oil. Those are the two main excretion products. What about absorption? You don't absorb a little bit of everything. Our skin does not absorb a whole lot, but we can absorb chemicals through our skin, whether they be good chemicals or bad chemicals, right? If there's something on this counter, let's say formaldehyde, because somebody had a dead body on this table, and I get it on my hands, it's not only toxic if I then lick my hands, right? Or if I eat my Taco Bell with my bare hands. It's some of that formaldehyde can get straight through my skin.
Can't nicotine do that?
Yeah, pretty much anything can. Some of it's going to get absorbed a lot easier than other things. Remember we talked about the skin was semi-permeable?
Yeah.
So some things will get absorbed faster than others, but most things will get through at least a little bit. Our skin also is important in the synthesis of vitamin D. We don't absorb vitamin D through our skin, but we have things in our skin that when the UV light hits them, it creates the first product in the chain that's going to make vitamin D. And so there's 3 places vitamin D gets made. It's a stepwise thing. First step happens in your skin, and then it gets transported inside, and the other steps happen in your liver and kidney. Then at the end of all of that, you have vitamin D. So we said that the integumentary system is the skin, the hair, the glands, the nails, but we also have these sensations. And so there are going to be receptors in our skin. And they are sensory receptors because they're receiving sensory signals from the outside. Our textbook says that the skin has two main parts, the epidermis and the dermis. And then under this, but not considered part of the skin, is the subcutaneous layer, also called the hypodermis. I think the book, if I remember right, the book for 2085 considers the hypodermis as part of the skin. Our textbook does not. And so in this class, if you see a question about the layers of the skin, is the epithelium and the dermis only. The hypodermis or subcutaneous layer is not considered part of the skin. If you go online, a lot of places are going to consider this as part of the skin. But in this class, it is not considered part of the skin. This is a nice diagram of the skin. We can see a lot in this diagram. So we said that there are two main parts of the skin, and then the hypodermis underneath. And they're pretty easy to pick out, actually, in a picture. So there is a layer here, a big layer here, and then a layer there. And they look very different from each other. The epidermis is the outermost layer. This is going to be pretty much only for protection, and then there's going to be some sensation there. We'll see this kind of zoomed in later on. Then there's a whole lot going on in the dermis. There's blood vessels, there's nerves, there's glands, there's hair follicles. And then down underneath is a subcutaneous layer, or the hypodermis, which is going to be mostly, what does this look like? Fat. It's mostly fat, and then there's blood vessels in there. So we'll talk about each things in each layer as we go. So starting with the epidermis. So the epidermis, back up. There we go. The epidermis is the uppermost layer. So that is this. From where you are, what you can probably see is there's a whole bunch of little dots in here, but you probably can't see much more detail. Can't even see that.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of little dots in there, okay? Those are cells. The epidermis is a very dense layer of cells. Its primary function is going to be the protection part of the skin. And in that epidermis, which is a keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. So it's a whole bunch of layers of cells. The uppermost layer is flat or squamous, and then there's an extra layer of keratin hard protein on the top. In that epidermis, we have 4 types of cells. The vast majority of them are keratinocytes. And they're named keratinocytes because they are the ones that make keratin. These are the cells that are going to make up the bulk, the mass of that epidermis. And their purpose is to provide protection by existing, and then also to make the keratin, which is going to make a little bit of a hard coating on the outside of the skin. Then we have melanocytes, which make melanin, which give our skin pigment. We all have melanocytes. We'll learn later on that we all make more or less the same amount of melanin. It's just where that melanin goes, how close to the surface it is, how dark our skin gets. We have something called intraepidermal macrophages. Some people call them Langerhans cells after the person that discovered them. So a macrophage is part of the immune system. It's basically a white blood cell. It's a type of cell that goes around and it eats things. If it sees something that's trying to invade our body, it's just going to swallow them up. And it's intraepidermal because it is inside. Intra means in the epidermis. So it's just a macrophage that's able to kind of wiggle its way through all the keratinocytes, looking for bacteria or viruses that are trying to get in through our skin. And when it finds it, it's just going to eat it. And then finally, we have tactile epithelial cells. Tactile is touch. And so these are going to detect the touch, the pain, the temperature. These are going to be kind of connected to the nervous system. So in the epidermis, there's going to be multiple layers in the epidermis. So we said the skin is made up of the epidermis and the dermis. Each of those layers is going to have sublayers in it. In the epidermis, the bottommost layer is called the stratum basale. The basal layer, remember, was the bottom, or the apical was the top. The stratum basale is the layer at the very, very bottom. This is where new cells are made. In the epidermis, cells are only made at the very, very bottom layer. When you make a new cell, at the bottom, it then pushes all of the old cells up a layer. And eventually the ones at the top fall off. So you're constantly replenishing from the bottom. And as you go up in the epidermis, the cells are getting older. As they get older, they make the keratin, which ends up on the top. The keratinized cells are the very, very old ones on the top, and over time they slough off and get replaced by the cells underneath. So we said the stratum basale was the deepest layer, the bottommost layer, the innermost layer. But there are actually 4 layers, and a layer is called a stratum. So plural is strata. So lower one was stratum basale. On top of that, we have, so at the very, very bottom, I just skipped ahead a couple slides, we'll go back. At the very, very bottom, we have the stratum basale, this bottommost layer here, and then that is a dividing cell. So that's showing you that the new cells are being made at the bottommost layer. Above that is this large layer called the stratum spinosum. The stratum spinosum is going to be for strength, and it's going to provide most of the flexibility, the springiness of our skin. Above that is the stratum granulosum. This is where the keratinocytes come to die. They were made down in the basale. They moved up. They were all healthy and doing well in the stratum spinosum. Then they get up to the stratum granulosum and they start to die. So they were made here. Over time they got pushed up. And now they're up here in the granulosum and they're going to start dying. And this is called the stratum granulosum because there are little granules in the cells. You don't need to know that they're called lamellar granules, but I would know that they have granules in them, and that's why they're called the granulosum. On top of that is the stratum corneum. The stratum corneum is the most superficial layer. That is the uppermost or outermost layer. When you look at your skin, you are seeing the stratum corneum. This is 4 layers. Most of the skin on our body has these 4 layers. This is called thin skin. But the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet have a 5th layer. The skin on the palms of my hands and on the soles of my feet is called thick skin because it has an extra layer. That extra layer is called stratum lucidum, and it's between the granulosum and the corneum. What does the word lucidum bring to mind? Lucid. I'll give you. I'll just take it. Lucid. What does lucid mean? You ever heard of someone having lucid dreams? You know what that means?
They're like really realistic.
Very realistic. Clear. Lucid means clear. You can in a lucid dream, you really can see and feel what's going on. It's very clear. So the stratum lucidum is a clear layer. So here we see it underneath the corneum, above the granulosum. You definitely want to know the order of the 5 layers of the skin, of the epidermis, and know which one of these 5 is present only in thick skin. In this picture,
All the epidermis.
this is all epidermis, yes. The epidermis is starting here, this is dermis down here, which we haven't got. So we see down here in stratum basale are some of our other cells. Here's a melanocyte. It's making melanin, that's these little black dots here. That melanin can then kind of work its way up through here to make our skin darker. We have a tactile epithelial cell. So that's going to feel something like touch. And then here is our intradermal macrophage. So we can see all of the cell types in this picture, and we can see all of the layers in this picture. Something to notice about the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, that's the only skin in your body where there is no hair and no sweat glands. What do you immediately notice about what I just said?
My hands sweat.
Your hands sweat, right? Turns out we're going to learn there are 2 types of sweat glands. So it has that type of sweat glands, but it doesn't have the second less common type. And we'll learn about those when we get there. So underneath the epidermis is the dermis. The dermis is underneath the epidermis, and it is mostly connective tissue. It has a couple different layers in it. The uppermost part is mostly our areolar connective tissue. The areolar connective tissue, we'll see the slide again today, but that was the one that looked like just a whole bunch of sticks laying randomly. It's a little stretchy, it's a little strong, it kind of does a little bit of everything. It's kind of the glue that's going to hold the epidermis, which is on top, to the more meaty parts underneath. The dermis has bumps. At the very, very top, which I'll go back and show you, these bumps are called dermal papilla. See, at the border between the dermis and the epidermis, the dermis has these bumps. The projections that go up are called dermal papilla. But if you have bumps that go up, that means you also have to have bumps that go down, otherwise you're going to have empty space there. The bumps that come down are the epidermal ridges. So if you're a geologist and you like to think of stalagmites, those are the dermal papilla going up. The stalactites hanging from the ceiling are the epidermal ridges. The dermis also has touch receptors, but they're a slightly different type. We'll learn more about the 2 types in the integumentary system labs. We said there were touch receptors in the epidermis, and there's also touch receptors in the dermis. Why do you think there are different types in the epidermis and the dermis?
They have different functions.
Different functions. They're both for touch. A while ago I said there are 2 types of touch. What were they?
Heat on the outside of the body, heat on the
Uh,
inside. Hot and cold.
I guess I made that kind of cloudy. There are, if I'm touching something, I'm interacting with it. So it's not pain, it's not temperature. There's 2 types of touch.
Pressure. and-
Pressure and just, am I touching something? I can put my hand on this table and I know I'm touching. It's a yes or no thing. Here I'm not touching something. here I am. Then I can also tell how hard am I touching it. So one of these receptors, one in the epidermis and one in the dermis, are responsible for those two functions. Which one do you think is which?
Dermis is probably pressure.
Dermis is pressure, yeah. Because if I touch it, that sensation, that little force, is not going to go all that far into my skin. So that sensor needs to be in the epidermis. Once I start pushing harder, now that force gets down in the dermis. So now the second sensor can tell me how hard am I touching it. And the dermis also has free nerve endings. These receptors are cells. They are specialized cells that can tell me when I'm touching things. Free nerve endings are just the ends of nerves that stop there. Okay? These are the pain sensors. So if you get a paper cut, a very, very light paper cut that's just in the epidermis, you're not going to feel any pain at all. You don't feel the pain until the cut gets down into the dermis where the free nerve endings are. This is also going to be the temperature.
This one is?
The free nerve endings are going to measure the temperature also.
The temperature of something outside of the body.
Yes. Yes. The bottom part of the dermis is mostly dense, irregular connective tissue. The dense, irregular connective tissue is the one we said is strong and can stretch in every direction. My skin never knows which way it's going to have to stretch, because I can flex a lot of different directions, and it needs to be able to flex a lot of different directions. But if you put too much force on your skin, what do you think is eventually going to happen to your skin? It's going to break. Because dense, irregular connective tissue is good at stretching every direction, only for so far. Whereas the dense, regular can go a long ways, but only in one direction. The dense, irregular connective tissue is mostly collagen, and then some elastic fibers. In skin cream, they're always talking about replenishing the collagen in your skin. This is where they're trying to get that collagen. Whether it can actually get there and whether it will stay there, whether it will be functional when it gets there, is a whole other question. In the deeper part of the dermis, we also have some adipose cells. Most of those are in the hypodermis under the skin, but there is some fat stored in the dermis. This is where the hair follicles are. This is where the major nerves are. So the nerve endings, little like fingers sticking up in the upper part of the dermis, are the actual sensors, but the nerves themselves are down towards the bottom of the dermis. This is where our oil glands are, and where our sweat glands are. Let me find a picture. So imagine this is the upper dermis. This is the lower dermis. There's no clear boundary between them. This is just a lot of connective tissue. There's not a whole lot going on. But once you get down here, now we have a lot of stuff. We have glands, we have hair follicles, we have sensors, we have nerves, we have a lot of things going on in there. Some of our skin tone comes not only from melanin, but from other things. The melanin we saw was made by melanocytes in the epidermis, but our skin color also comes from hemoglobin and keratin. What color is hemoglobin?
Red.
Red. That's the red in your blood. What color is keratin?
White. Yellow. Black.
What color? Orange. This is an easy one once you know it. Carrot. Carrots are called carrots because they have a whole bunch of keratin in them. Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. They're connected because they have a lot of the other things. Okay? So, the color of all of our skin is based off of the different ratios of these three things. You can literally turn yourself orange if you eat a bunch of carrots. You have to eat a bunch of it, but it does happen.
Are you serious?
Yes, it does actually happen. People get on the fad diets and they're eating a whole bunch of carrots and they will literally turn orange.
Like how orange?
Like noticeably orange.
My friend had a baby
Not-
whose nose was orange because like all he was eating was carrot baby food,
Really?
and his nose was literally orange. And yeah, she went to the doctor and they said lay off the carrots.
Yeah.
So.
Lay off
I don't, it's not quite Oompa Loompa orange, but it's pretty, it's noticeably
Yeah.
orange.
So if you like eat like a bag of carrots.
No, you gotta eat more than that. Like a bag of carrots a day for a long time. I like a
I
lot
like
of
carrots,
carrots.
so I don't know.
Cheetos, I don't think will work. So that together, those together are what's going to make up our skin color. So then there's the hypodermis. The hypodermis, remember, is not technically part of the skin. That is this layer down here. We say it is subcutaneous. Cutaneous refers to skin, and so subcutaneous is under the skin. This is mostly adipose tissue, but it also has some areolar tissue. It has two main functions. Number one, it's going to be some padding. We have important things under our skin. If we can absorb some of that shock before that force gets down to those important things, that's a good thing. And so we have a layer of fat under our skin for padding, and this is very, very good glue. We don't want our skin separated from the rest of our body. Otherwise, it's just going to move all over the place. I can go like this and move it a little bit, but in reality, the stuff under my skin is moving with it. If it's not connected, then the whole thing can just slide off to the side, and that's not going to work very well. Usually, if you get a drug injection,
Like,
not a
even in the
vaccine,
hospital. Oh.
not a vaccine, but a drug. And so that's probably going to be in the hospital. Yeah. Because most drugs that you take, they're pills, right? But some drugs you can't take as a pill. You have to get it as an injection. And so a lot of times that's going to be in the subcutaneous layer. And that's because this is where the large blood vessels associated with our skin are. What I want you to look at here is we have large blood vessels here, we have small blood vessels here, and then we have no blood vessels up there. In the epidermis, there are no blood vessels. All of the nutrients for the epidermis have to come from the dermis. That's why we have the blood vessels that come right up to the border. Their job is to dump a bunch of nutrients off and hope they kind of diffuse up into the epidermis. That is why, as the cells go up, they die. Because as they get further up, they get away from the blood supply, they can't get their nutrients, and they die. So we're going to put our drug down here, because that's where the large blood vessels are. If we put it up here, we're not going to absorb it. If we put it here, it's going to get absorbed very, very slowly. So we're going to put it down here. We could put it straight into a blood vessel, right? Something like an IV. But that's a very, very quick delivery. Some drugs, you want to kind of slow release it, but you don't want it so slow that the person dies before they absorb it.
So you take this and doctor shot, like flu shot.
So a flu shot's going to go deeper. A flu shot's going to go in, way down into the muscle. Okay? So if I've never done this to a person, I don't work with people. So I work with mice and rats. Okay, and so with mice and rats, you would do this, and you get a little bubble underneath the
Oh,
skin.
okay.
Okay. Sometimes you'll do that, at least with pets. If they're dehydrated,
Yeah.
you'll give them a fluid injection, and you go just under the skin. You kind of pick up a little flap of skin, and you go right into the flap. And they get a bubble there. It's a visible bubble. You can poke it and all kinds of stuff. And then as it gets absorbed, the bubble goes away.
So like when you get like a TB test, they put on the bubble on your skin.
I've never had that done, so I don't know how exactly that works.
It's like almost like they do that too, like just right under your skin, they put dead cells.
Yeah, I know
And then it
they make a
bubbles
bubble
up
and they
like
measure how
that.
big it gets.
Mhm.
That's probably here. Yeah. The subcutaneous fat, we say, is for padding, but it's also an energy reservoir. We need to store fat everywhere. If it's all in one place, that kind of makes us kind of out of balance. So we kind of move stuff around. That fat is also thermal insulation. Think of a walrus or a whale, right? This layer tends to be thicker in women than in men, but it's thin in infants and elderly. Why do you think this layer is thinner in infants and elderly?
Infants, they don't have, time to build up their fat yet.
Yeah, infants haven't had time. I mean, you have to take in extra energy in order to be able to store it as fat, right?
Uh-huh.
What about elderly?
They don't have the energy either,
Why don't they have the energy?
because they're using it to survive.
Oh my god!
So are we. So are we. Elderly, they don't eat as much, and they don't absorb the nutrients as much as well. And so they just don't have the excess. And so over time, their body starts using the subcutaneous fat, and it's going to go away. So here's our thing. Here we can see all the parts that we talked about. Now we can talk about the accessory structures. All of these other big things here in the dermis that serve individual functions. So these are the accessory structures. The first one, the most obvious one, are hairs. The technical term for a hair is a pilus. P-I-L-U-S. Plural is pili. This is everywhere on your body except in the thick skin, in the palms, and the soles. Everywhere else on your body has hair. Some places it's thicker than others. Some places it may not be even noticeable, like your forehead. You can't even really see it, but it is, in fact, there. In reality, hair is a big, tall stack of dead keratinized cells. That's all it is. It's a big stack of dead cells. That hair is made up of three parts. There's the shaft of the hair, which is the part that is above the skin. The type of hair that somebody was in a hurry when they named, they call it the in-skin part. And then there's the follicle. So the follicle is the part at the very bottom where the hair is actually being made. The shaft is the part above the hair, above the skin. And then the in-skin part is the part above the follicle, but still within the hole. So still in the skin.
So what does it mean if your hair grows fast?
That means this. So this is the follicle down at the bottom. Okay, we will come back to the slide we just skipped. These are cells that are dividing. We said the hair itself is just a big stack of dead cells. Those dead cells came from here. The faster these cells divide, the more dead cells you get.
How
The
do you
faster
make
your hair grows.
Whatever, divide faster.
Say that again?
How do you make it divide faster?
Number one is probably genetics. It's probably the biggest thing. But also, cells grow better when you have the right nutrients. If the
Right
cells are
nutrients?
getting the stuff that they need, they're going to grow faster. If you're malnourished, your hair is going to stop growing as fast. Attached to the hair is a muscle called the erector pili. Also can be called the piloerector muscle. This is what makes your hair stand up. So when you get scared or cold, either one, and your hair stands up and you get goosebumps. Do you call them goosebumps around here?
Oh,
Yeah.
goosies.
I got goosebumps.
Okay.
I
So,
don't know about her.
when you get goosebumps, that is the erector pili muscle pulling on the hair. So here is the skin, here's a hair. There's a muscle in the dermis called the erector pili, and it's going to pull on that hair. When it pulls on it, it's going to make it stand up, and it's going to cause that bump in your skin.
So it pulls on the hair follicle?
Yes. The color of your hair is due to melanin. Okay? There are actually there are a few types of melanin. There's the melanin that causes the darkening of your skin, but there are also other colors of melanin. And so the different combination of melanin colors causes the different colors of hair.
So does this refer to like dogs too?
Yeah.
Okay. Because my Yorkie has gray hair. That's all right.
Is it gray?
It's gray and
It's
white.
older, so it's getting gray.
She's really not that old.
So is it white?
No, it's gray. It's silver.
Oh.
Like silver. I don't know. Probably from working with us.
So,
Poor thing.
so gray hair comes from melanin. Okay? Sorry, a lack of melanin. And so, what did I do? So that melanin, there are no melanocytes in a hair. And so that melanin has to come from the cells in the hair follicle. And so, especially animals can have different colors in different parts of their body, right? Because genetically, the cells over here make more melanin than the cells over here. And so, in the white part of your dog, those cells are not making melanin. So gray hair is a reduce of melanin. White hair is air in the hair shaft. So the innermost part of the hair actually becomes hollow, and there's air in there. We'll talk more about all the layers of the hair, and we do this in the lab. But you can see it's kind of like an onion, right? There are layers going out.
Did you say it's like honey?
An onion,
Oh.
Or-
honey.
no, or you could say it's like an ogre, too.
Ogre?
An ogre. Ogres are like onions.
Okay.
You get it?
Yeah. Like the Shrek thing?
Yeah.
I don't know the photo, but.
Okay. Let's take a break.
Oh, God.
Yes.
We'll come back at 7 o'clock on that clock.
That he is being my puppy, and he like mumbles something. I was like, what? I have to move. What? And he's going like, have you ever seen me do that? When you look at
Yeah,
it?
it's like all around.
It's like high school.
Yeah.
Stupid. I looked up. He's literally doing
Got
that.
you, dude.
And I'm like, I was like, he's like, you know what it means, right? Yeah. And then just drove off.
And you don't know. You don't know.
No.
Okay,
I
that is
never
weird.
did.
No, like that.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
I like sent someone a Snapchat. I was like,
Like, you should have like.
I felt like I was a bit.
You should have like threw a bunch of gloves.
Yeah.
I can't even do it. That is hilarious. That is he like, yeah, was he like really young?
He was probably, I mean, he was probably in his late 20s.
That's so old to be just
Like,
wanted to get you.
like,
Wow.
yeah.
Like, what even, like, back when we were younger, it was like, if you looked at you,
You
you
get
get
punched.
punched.
Yes.
You like stick your arm out, like, come on, hurry up.
Right.
That was
Honestly, it
hilarious.
was uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, that was.
What?
I mean, like, did you like poison me too while you were in
Game
the
It's so awkward.
It was actually like death. It was exciting.
Definitely not. I was like,
Alright.
that's fine. You try pulling out of there and not getting wrecked. I'm just so confused at what that.
Cause I was like, that's really funny.
But in high school, like, we always did this. It was never like, so you sing it like this.
Like like art, like the way they it had to be like below your waist,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
That's like above your heels, like that, like
Yeah.
this, like
Yeah,
that.
I've seen pictures and
Yeah,
things.
it's like all of those like much like moves now. I don't know why. Somebody had like that. Did you see that? That was pretty cute
They
actually.
got me. I'll never forget that. I was just like,
Yeah, that's next time you
congrats,
go.
dude.
Next time you go through there, whoever gives it to you, just give them one of those. Really react. You probably make their day. It's probably like
some
some
older lady getting in that
It's
minute.
true.
You probably would.
They cry a little bit.
Yeah.
They looking up a line to see
Well,
what
like, I felt like you probably don't have a little, just because I was so gone hard. Like, my initial response was, I don't know how to do that. I
Yeah.
was like,
Thanks.
yeah, thank you. I just was like, yeah. You try to try
All right on, like, dude. Yeah.
Girl.
That's hilarious.
What do you have going on today?
He says you know that.
He's just like super bored. He had to make some kind of
Right? Or like his meetings like totally different and yeah, you like God knows what he was getting.
It was weird. Like, should like, we probably shouldn't do that.
Right? You should have like made like a big stink about it. Get some free
Keep
coffee.
your ranger.
Yeah. Oh, you're really offended. Seriously.
God, it's
Them
so-
fighting words around here.
I'm gonna see what this dude, my friend Dylan, what she said. 'Cause he's gonna be like,
That is like seriously funny. Oh my gosh.
somebody's fucking. He said, we got you. Just me a goddamn. Big goddamn. He said, seems weird though.
Like, I've never seen anyone just like get somebody randomly. He's getting every customer like, you can't stop me.
It's just funny because like delusion right now. Let me just tell you, so I drive up to the window. He hands me my coffee. I hand him $2. And I'm like, if you can, here's the receipt. He mumbles something. I remember reading this. I just like, he mumbles something. What, sir? I looked up. He's like,
You should have just.
yeah, true. I was like,
That is
you know what that means, right? Yeah. I think.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
I'm scared to know your definition.
That's hilarious. He said, what, sir? He's like, give me.
Weird. Should have got his name back.
That is hilarious.
I didn't start.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I
Like, that could have totally been like, like a vine or like something like that. That's
Something like that.
hilarious.
It was like half asleep, so I did not expect that.
I'm just like imagining this dude like just getting
Like, yes.
super weird. I know him doing it all weird. Like, yeah, it totally is like a gang. So he's like asking you like want drugs or something. He's like, oh my gosh, that is so funny. It's good stuff.
Something weird. I'm glad you knew about that.
That is freaking hilarious. Yeah, it's so weird like how like certain like memes and stuff. The internet humor is so ridiculous. Yeah, it's like
Sometimes I love it.
oh, I
Like
love
Twitter,
it.
I love Twitter.
I didn't figure out how to deactivate them, but I deleted the app just because I was like nothing was going on.
Yeah.
Nobody was like tweeting me back. No, I'm just joking.
He was salty.
Right. Yeah, I was a little salty, but a little soy sauce, but do Instagram, but I like the
Oh, yeah,
Insta.
like it's.
Well,
I'm trying to use it. Not
I used to like be like super against it and like never wanted to get on there. And my friend Jennifer was telling me about it last time. She like convinced me to get it. And I'm like super basic now. I don't know what this is. I just find that I'm like addicted to like everybody, you know, like you just start scrolling and like 5 hours go by and you're like, I can't stop.
I know. I don't know. I guess I just, I don't know. I follow so many people on Twitter, so it's like,
Right.
stupid.
Right. That's me on Instagram. It's like things I follow on there. And it's like, oh, I think it's so hilarious. But it's Facebook is always like so serious. And people are like, oh, my dog and this. And I'm like, all right. I understand, but I can only take so much. It's like,
Well, like when I do
humor.
Facebook, I just feel like I always see videos and
Oh my gosh.
I don't really see any like people. I
Yeah.
feel like always
Yeah,
see, like,
nobody-
tasty videos, which I like.
Right. The food tasty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
follow them or on something. I'm always seeing
Yeah.
I follow like a lot of food.
I know,
on
I've
Instagram.
never tried anything.
Me neither.
Actually.
I never cooked anything.
People would never
Just
do it.
like, I just always imagine myself doing it like one day, and then that day never comes. It's like,
I need to do it one day, but
Right.
like not.
yeah, no. McDonald's.
I had Chipotle the other night. It was so good.
Oh, heck yeah. I haven't eaten there in a long time, actually.
It was like 5 o'clock in. Nobody's really in there, which is surprised, but it was kind of late. And I got in and out and legit less than 5 minutes. I'm like, wow, this is really good.
What's up? Heck yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I thank you. I don't want to be here.
Right? I hate that.
Chipotle gets taxed.
Oh my god. Every time
I went like
there.
probably 45 minutes for it.
Yeah, I was a dental assistant for like 6 months at they every lunch, I swear to God, they wanted to go out to a restaurant like every time, which was cool.
Yeah,
but
but-
I was spending
But-
over $100.
But today was pretty boring.
But
Yeah,
So-
they always get Chipotle. That's like the only time I would go back with them because I'm like, yeah.
Most
and when I
food-
first tried Chipotle, I was
most
like,
food does it
I was like, I had those before. I was
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah. I'm all of those cheaper and just like lots of.
I don't get full.
I can like eat a gallon of cheese. It's like-
I know, and I read online. So
Oh no, what's wrong with you?
No, I'm not getting that. Never, but the case that.
Oh my God. I'm scared. I was like,
No, I read online that the ratings was like top 5 restaurants.
seriously?
Yeah, like other stuff too.
So there is or isn't?
Isn't.
Oh.
And the true God.
Crap. Because the one you said, have you ever been to that one?
I went
It's
there.
rough.
Yeah,
It's smart.
but have they moved? They moved.
Well, it's still in like the Hitchcock Plaza. It's still in.
Okay, yeah. Because when I was younger, I remember they were near. True God restaurant, maybe.
Probably.
Near Jahn.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we only have a few slides left actually.
Yay!
So next, in our skin, we have glands. And remember, a gland can be a single cell, or it can be a group of cells. Say it again?
Dermis, epidermis, but not subcutaneous tissue.
Correct. There are no glands in the epidermis. They're all going to be in the dermis. So in our skin, we have a few types. We have sebaceous glands, which we'll learn are the oil glands. We have sudoriferous glands, which are sweat glands, and ceruminous glands. So the sebaceous glands are the oily ones. These are the ones that put the oil on your skin. These are the ones that put the oil on your hair. And the reason that oil ends up on your hair is because sebaceous glands actually dump their oil into a hair follicle. So on your scalp, there's big hair in that hair follicle. And so most of the oil goes up the hair. Some of it, though, gets left behind on your scalp. On something like the palms of your hands, you don't have hair follicles. So you don't have hair follicles on the palms of your hands, and so you don't have sebaceous glands on the palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. Sebaceous glands only empty into hair follicles, and there are no hair follicles on the palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. The oil that they make is called sebum. If you've ever used something on your skin called lanolin, has anyone ever heard of it? I think it's kind of outdated at this point. People used to use lanolin, Lanolin. The people used to use it as skin cream before like Vaseline and stuff like that. But that is literally sheep sebum.
It's what?
Sheep sebum. It's the oil from a sheep. People put it in a tube and put it on their skin.
My dad used to use that stuff. It's stinky?
I've never actually
It's stinky though.
seen it in real life.
Yeah. Isn't it called something else though?
I don't know, it's good. It's lanolin is the name I know.
Something weird. But
Maybe there's a brand name. Maybe, I don't know. But that oil serves a few purposes. Number one, it's going to help prevent our skin from drying out. What do you know about water and oil?
they don't mix.
They don't mix. So if you put a layer of oil over your skin, it's going to make it harder for the water to escape. Because for that water to escape, it's going to have to get through the oil, and which it can't do. So it's going to have to find little spots where there isn't oil. Most of the water lost through your skin is from your sweat glands, not from the water in your skin actually just evaporating out. So that's going to keep the water from evaporating. It's going to keep your skin soft. You put oil on something, it keeps it moist, keeps it nice and soft. And certain bacteria are inhibited by sebum. Bad bacteria. Our skin is covered with bacteria. Whether you like it or not, it is.
Always?
Always.
Even after I shower?
Even after you shower. If you take, I don't know if they do it here. When I took microbiology in college, we did an experiment where we washed our hands, we put our hands on a petri dish, washed our hands again, and put our hands on another petri dish. What you found is that the more you wash, the more bacteria grew on that petri dish.
So you should wash your hands.
What the problem is, the first time you wash your hands, you're washing off the bacteria that don't belong there. They're not designed to stick all that hard, and so they come off easily. But the more you wash, then you start washing off the good bacteria, which aren't going to hurt you.
Oh.
And so you wash once well, and there's no reason to wash again, because at that point, you're just washing off bacteria that aren't going to hurt you. So certain bacteria can't grow on our skin at all. The sebum, the chemicals in the sebum are going to keep them from growing.
So it's actually really bad to wash your hands like that.
No, I wouldn't say that. If you are a hypochondriac and you continuously wash your hands over and over and over and over again all day long, then you might have an effect. What happens is the good bacteria help prevent the bad bacteria from growing there. And so if you get a cut, bad bacteria around that cut can immediately go in. And so if you're a hypochondriac that washes your hands every 10 minutes, but at 5 minutes after washing your hands, you get a cut, there's going to be some bad bacteria there because the good bacteria weren't there to prevent the bad bacteria from growing. Ceruminous glands make an oil in the outer ear canal. We'll learn more about the ears later in the semester, but the outer ear canal is the part where you go in until you hit the eardrum. Where you stick your Q-tip, even though the instructions on the Q-tip specifically say, do not go down into your ear. But everyone who uses a Q-tip pushes it in until they feel pain, and they say, oh, that's too far, let me take it back out. Okay? So that is your outer ear canal, where you can get a Q-tip. Okay?
It feels so good though to rub it around. It really does.
I used to blow
I get
my nose and pop
paranoid.
my
I'm like,
ears,
Yeah?
and I busted.
I do not like that.
Oh.
I busted my ear on it.
Yeah? Hurt.
It's like the worst pain ever.
Were you in Florida? Were you in Florida? Or were you like in the mountains? Like doing that on purpose?
I was at home. You don't have to really pop your ears.
So, earwax belongs on the outer ear. Okay, the earwax is outside of your eardrum. Ceruminous glands make cerumen. Cerumen is a waxy oil. But cerumen is a combination, or it's not cerumen. Earwax, as we know it, is a combination of mainly cerumen and dead skin. There's a lot of dead skin and hair and bacteria and sweat in earwax.
So what's a good way to clean your ears?
The best way is, unless it's causing a problem, don't.
But it's disgusting. People get take out your
Dog
ears.
side.
The doctor, let a doctor do it.
Yeah, but
So-
isn't earwax like good for your ears?
Yeah, I mean, let's think about this. We have earwax for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Right? Well, what do you think that is?
Keep everything out. They catch it, it goes in.
Right. If we get dust or bacteria or virus that goes into our ear, it's going to get stuck. Eventually, that earwax works itself out, and that dust comes out. It's also going to help moisturize the eardrum. If the eardrum dries out, then it's going to break a lot, and it's not going to work as well. And so we want earwax in there.
Have you ever heard of one of them little candle things that you stick in your ear, you lay like this, you put a plate and you burn it?
So I've never seen that. I had a friend who actually took earwax. It was not from him. It was from, I don't know, I think he worked at like an animal shelter, and he got a whole bunch of dog earwax. And he made a candle out of it, and it did work.
How do you
Yeah.
dog earwax?
What?
No, I'm talking about the things like you buy at the.
Oh, I don't.
It's like it's literally like a little tube thing, and at the end it has this pointy thing, and it sticks on your ear,
I,
and you burn the top of it.
I'm
and it
not
burns
familiar
it
with
down,
that.
And
Well,
it sucks the earwax out.
when I was little, I had a whole bunch of earwax, and I'd go to the doctor, and they take what was basically a high-pressure squirt gun, and they shoot it in there to knock it loose, and then you turn your head, and as the water came out, hopefully the earwax did also.
Yeah, I had to do that one time.
Well, you got the eardrum there, so as long as it's not powerful enough to break the eardrum, you're not going to hurt anything. So the third type of gland in our skin are sudoriferous glands. Sudoriferous glands are sweat glands. But that term is a generic term for sweat glands, because we have two types of sweat glands. So a sudoriferous gland can be either one of them. What you think of as sweat glands are eccrine sweat glands. Some places will call them merocrine sweat glands. Merocrine and eccrine are the same thing. These are the sweat glands that make sweat when you get hot. Okay? These have their own little duct that leads to the surface of your skin. The pores on your skin that sweat come out of are separate from the hair follicles. They are their own holes. Okay? Pretty much everywhere on your body you have eccrine sweat glands. But you know in certain places of your body you get sweatier. And that's simply because there are more of these here. Palms of your hand get sweaty very easily. If you start exercising or it gets hot out, you get full sweat on your forehead, which drips down into your eyes. Right? It's annoying. You don't notice it as much because you're wearing socks or something that's going to soak up the sweat. But the soles of your feet also have a whole bunch of eccrine sweat glands. So because these have their own duct, they can be present in both thin and thick skin. This is just basically salt water. Sweat is basically just salt water.
There's only one of those kinds stink.
Yes. The other type is miracrine sweat glands. I pointed at apocrine and said miracrine. These are apocrine sweat glands. These are only found in a few places on your body. Armpit, groin, and then the face on males. These are the sweat glands that stink. Okay? These are going to make oily sweat. Why do you think those stink and these do not?
I don't know. Oil.
What about the oil? Something about the oil.
It's got like toxins in it.
So there's two things. There's the immediate stink, and then there's BO stink. The really bad stink. They're different types of stinks, okay? What do you think is the immediate type of stink?
Oily.
It's something in the oil. Yes,
Is it really?
hormones. So hormones are basically steroids, which are lipids. Lipids include oils and steroids. And so there are hormones and stuff in the oil in that sweat. And so that is the immediate smell. Those are pheromones. That was evolved over a long period of time to communicate. Okay? What's another term for this type of sweat that you hear sometimes? Anybody think of it?
Active sweat.
Opposite.
Unactive sweat.
Stress sweat. Ever heard the term stress sweat? When we stress, these sweat glands kick into gear. Think evolutionarily. Why would we want to put off pheromones in that situation?
To scare off other people.
Yes and no. Not to scare them off.
Like real basic.
To warn them.
To warn them I'm scared.
Yes. Because if I'm scared for a reason. I'm probably in danger. That's telling somebody else, don't come here. Okay? I'm in danger. If you come in here, you will be in danger. Then there is the long-term, really, really, really stinky sweat. The dirty clothes type of stink.
That's eccrine?
That's also apocrine.
Oh, okay.
But why is there a different type of stink?
Because that one's active sweat.
Nope. If you have oil, what's going to happen? If I just put oil out here,
It's gonna sit there.
it's going to sit there.
Good.
It's not gonna absorb.
It's gonna get hot.
And what happens when it gets hot?
It stinks worse.
But why?
It's sticky, I don't know.
If you leave food out, why are you not going to then eat it
It's
later?
really
Might
rotten.
be sick, guys.
Why is it going to make you sick?
Bacteria. Oh.
Bacteria, yes. Stuff's going to grow on it. That growing stuff is going to give off a smell. And so if you don't wash these parts of your body, the oil's going to build up, the bacteria are going to grow there, and the bacteria are going to stink.
It's true.
So the way I remember this, apocrine sweat glands are the stinky ones. They make you smell like an ape. Okay? I said the other word for eccrine is miracrine. Like mirror, shiny. Normal sweat can kind of make you shiny, right? So normal sweat, stinky sweat. The actual term for BO is called bromidrosis. Okay, that's not part of this class. It's included in my 2085 lectures. The way I recommend remembering that is bro.
Yeah.
Right? You stink.
Real quick, are tear sweat glands? Or no? Or
They are
sweat?
modified sweat glands, yes. Breasts are also.
Who?
Breasts are
Breasts.
modified sweat glands, actually.
Breast as a whole or sweat gland?
Yes. Wait to the very, very, very end of the semester, we'll cover it.
Your tears are salty. So,
Yeah. The last type of, I think it's the last,
Thing.
yeah. The last type of accessory structure in our skin to cover are our nails. Nails are basically specialized hair. It's the same thing. It's dead, keratinized cells. They're just pressed very densely together in a different shape than in your hair. If you look at your nail, there are some obvious parts to the nail. The nail body is any part of the nail that you can see. The free edge is the part that overhangs your finger, the part that you trim. The nail root is embedded in your skin. The nail actually extends down below what you can see. The nail root is buried in there. The lanula is that little white spot down at the bottom of the visible part of your nail.
And so, okay, can there be a full moon? If you
I
get
don't
everything
think
back
it-
on us?
I've never seen a picture of what the skin pulled back.
I haven't either.
I don't know. I wouldn't think so. My guess is a complete guess, is that that's all there is.
Okay.
The cuticle is the skin that overhangs the nail body. So at the very, very base, you see a little bit of skin that overhangs. My wife is constantly pushing it back. And I always say, why do you push that back? It's there for a reason. I don't know what it is, but it's there for a reason. Stop pushing it back. And she
I think,
continues
aren't you supposed to
push
push it back? So it doesn't eventually grow, it's not ever gonna grow.
I have never once pushed it back, and I don't have any problems.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I know people always push it back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they always push it
But
back.
They seem to know what
I
they're doing.
doubt they know why they're
I
doing it.
thought
I
it
think
helps
it's-
it helps it breathe. That's what I thought.
I thought they just pushed
That,
it back.
seems,
So you
that,
have one
that
now.
seems like a highly dubious claim.
Mine are really bad.
At the very, very base of the nail, in the nail root, is the nail matrix. So that is where your nail is growing. Your nail grows down in the buried part and then pushes the old part out. That's why if you get a damage, or you see the little white spot in your nail, over a long period of time, it will grow out, right? Just like your hair grows up, the nail grows out from the base. So here we see it. So here's the free edge, the body, the lanula, the cuticle, and then the root. And here we see it from the side, like somebody ran their finger through a saw blade. Okay? And so you got the free edge hanging off, the body, the lanula, the cuticle, and the root. So this person did not draw a full moon. But I'm guessing the person who drew this has never seen an actual picture with that skin pulled back either. So if you want to try it, I'd be curious what
It
it
won't
looks
go
like.
back that far. You can tell. You have to do it on a dead person or someone who can't go it.
Okay. So the last slide is the integumentary system has very obvious symptoms of aging. Pretty much all of our systems do. Why do you think we're so focused on the aging of our integumentary system?
Because it makes us old.
Because it makes us look old. Because we are vain, right? The fact that our skin gets wrinkled does not have much functional purpose. It doesn't have a bad effect. Our kidneys stopping working because we get old is a bad thing. But we care more about the wrinkles than we care about our kidneys. Most of these changes start at about age 40.
For a male and female.
Yes. Most of these changes are because the collagen fibers start to decrease in number, so we don't have as much collagen. The collagen that we have gets stiff. When it gets stiff, it breaks. It gets disorganized and turns into a tangled mess. So, what did we say collagen did in your skin?
Stretches.
It's the stretchiness. It's what makes it bounce back, right? A wrinkle is more or less a permanent thing that didn't bounce back. I don't know what you want to call it. I wanted to call it a wrinkle, but I can't say a wrinkle is basically a wrinkle because that doesn't work. So the collagen, when you don't have as much of it, your skin is not as stretchy. When it gets stiff, even before it breaks, something that is stiff is not stretchy. If you take a spring and get it rusty, it's not going to stretch. It's going to pull it and stretch a little bit, and it's going to snap. If you take your collagen fibers and you break them apart, you now have a bunch of little pieces. And a big, long stick is much more flexible than a short stick. And if it's disorganized, they can't work together. If you put multiple sticks bundled together, it's stronger. You can still flex, but it's not going to break. If you take all the sticks and spread them apart, they're all on their own and they're going to break easier. The elastic fibers in our skin become less elastic. They clump together, they fall apart and fray, and this can actually be very much accelerated by smoking. I don't know about you, but if I see someone who has smoked for a while, for part of their life, you can just see it. It's in their skin, especially their face, because that's where all the smoke is, but the rest of their body looks different than the skin of a non-smoker, right? It's hard to put words on it and describe it, but you just know it. And that's because the elastic fibers are falling apart. So their skin is not as stretchy. The fibroblasts, what do fibroblasts make? Fibers. So the fibroblasts are making the collagen and the elastic. The fibroblasts die off. They're not getting replenished fast enough, and so their numbers decrease. And so that's why the amount of collagen and the amount of elastic fibers is going to go down. When all of this happens, we get wrinkles. Our wrinkles are different than his wrinkles. He just has too much skin. Okay? That has to fold up somewhere. We have the right amount of skin, but then it loses its stretchiness and it just kind of flops around.
So we have extra skin.
We have extra skin because it's not stretchy. If it was stretchy, it would shrink down to match the size of our body. So that is the integumentary system. You have questions about this?
No.
Okay. So, believe it or not, that is actually